Hey y'all, this is Ben here at Third Motion Studios. Just wanted to give you a little announcement of something that I thought was going to be pretty fun. Uh, that's not musical. That I'll be doing. If anybody wants to check out a new YouTube channel I'll be creating on cosmology and consciousness with a little bit of spirituality, but a lot of math, physics, geometry, that kind of thing. Like I said, it's cosmology and consciousness and trying to understand things that I believe are not well explained by pretty much anybody except for a very few people. And that the world is kind of like missing some insights that I think it could really benefit from just understanding like what is God and like what is God real? There's how did the world come to be and all this kind of things that people are stuck on. I think I have some pretty good things to say to add to that conversation. So including a theory I have called quantum aliasing, and for anybody who's stuck with me in this video this far, I will just give you a little sample by explaining what that is, which is a theory I've been developing mostly in my brain for years, and it's also been borrowed heavily from other people's work that I've checked out, so it's not very new as far as uh, new content as much as it is like remixed content to create kind of a bigger mega piece of content, which I think describes gravity and time and everything that you could want to know about the cosmos. Uh, so basically, quantum aliasing is, I took the word aliasing from the concept in music production or compression, specifically referring to file compression. Of like if you take a WAV file and put it into an MP3, you're losing a lot of data and you're getting a lot of quality reduction. That's because you're taking a continuous signal or almost continuous signal and you are bringing it down to fewer steps like samples. You're kind of creating kind of like if you were to find a grainy photograph with like very few pixels or whatever, the fewer pixels creates like noise in your image, the same way that creating an MP3 creates noise from downsampling. So basically, what we do as human like observers, we create reality in that moment of observation. New theories like the orchestrated objective reduction by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff talking about how that's an intrinsic like part of reality. And so, like, our actually creating reality happens when we measure it. And there's a lot of people in the rationalist, like, atheist side, people saying that we're not actually creating it. It's just measurements. It could be anything. But there's always got to be eventually us involved in order for that to happen. So, the other thing is that when we downsample, this infinite realm that we downsample is where circles are defined by pi, where right angles are defined by a square root of 2 as a hypotenuse, and other things that, involve irrational numbers, the transcendentals and other irrational numbers, which are numbers that never end, that never have, that can't be expressed as a ratio because they go on forever after the decimal, like kind of like pi. In Euler's number, other numbers like that define pretty much everything. What we do is that we cannot take an infinite amount of information in our senses, so we actually, in the very measurement that we do just by looking and smelling and everything, we're actually creating a sort of boundary condition where we are dividing like this infinite signal into like a finite amount of sensory signals that are holographically projected crystallizations or fractalizations of this unattainable infinite resolution we are trying to get as we ascend. And that as we ascend towards this infinite resolution, that's why we have our cosmos also expanding with it, we have expansion, and that we have this bubble of consciousness that goes 10 to the 35 meters outwards to the edge of the observable universe, all the way down to 10 to the negative 35 meters, or like 1.6 meters to the 10 to the 35 to 1.6 meters to the 10 to the negative 35, which means that like your average human being is like exactly logarithmically in the center of 72 orders of magnitude, which is not really a coincidence in my opinion. And you know, the fact that we are the center of this field of information that's infinite, that we have to chop into a finite amount of bits that creates our reality, that aliasing I was talking about earlier, that it basically causes space-time curvature, because if you have access of two different dimensions, they have to be 9 degrees apart. Any hypotenuse of a 90-degree unit triangle is square root of 2, which can't be rendered because it's irrational. So then we're going to have tension on all sides equally of that axis, which creates implosive and explosive sort of symmetry, which is our fourth dimension of time. As you can tell, like time isn't really like the past and the future; it's more inwards and outwards. Like when we were inwards was the Big Bang, but we're really never inwards. We're just projecting the direction that galaxies seem to be moving backwards in what we consider time. But time is not actually even real, because we currently have photons from the Big Bang called the cosmic microwave background, and that they're coming from roughly the same place as the outside of the observable universe. So we're just actually a projection from the outside and the inside. We're in the middle, you know, of 10 to the positive 35 meters down to 10 to the negative 35. And like we're the 1.67 meters or whatever in between. And that aliasing causes curvature, which is gravity, right? Because like if you don't have a perfect right angle degrees in all directions, you get like tension in all directions. And then there's the aspect of it that where time happens. Why does time happen? Because time happens because as you create finite approximations of the relationships between geometric forms, like the circle and a square, for example. If anybody into sacred geometry knows about the feminine and the masculine shapes and their relationships with numbers and stuff, would know that it's important, and ratio is very important. And that these ratios are basically like division problems that are like long division problems, right? If you ever want to do a ratio that's like not simple to solve, then it takes like a sequence of steps. So sequential computation is what our brain does, and it's also what reality does, because we are the creators, co-creating with God, which is this invisible field of potential wisdom and knowledge and intelligence that exists in order for us to have the potential to grow in those areas. So like if you're an atheist, please comment below on how you can become more wise without there being a field of information. And this field information would have to exist, because you could say, well, it's not real. It's just like this wisdom is like hypothetical. Well, you know, it does actually have a shape when you have everything come to perfect optimization. It's not a subjective thing like atheists believe it to be, like everybody has their own opinion about what works best for everybody. Well, not really. I mean, optimization is exactly like pure mathematical way to optimize multivariables equations, right? But we're just not smart enough to do that to all of reality. Doesn't mean that there isn't a field of information. And for it to be real, it helps for it to be visible and observable, which I can tell you it is, because these golden ratio spirals that you keep hearing about in the woo-woo or community or whatnot are actually the legitimate geometry of like nature, in terms of it's approximating it through Fibonacci spirals, or electromagnetic fields are actually spirals. And while none of them are true golden ratio spirals, they're all approximations to a certain degree, which defines its characteristics, its physics. Like I said, we have infinite field, so clearly as finite beings, with finite sensory equipment, like, we're not going to get all that data of the spiral, but that golden ratio spiral, as defined mathematically, is the shape of God in a certain sense, because it represents this infinitely irrational, the most irrational number, which, within its design creates the possibility for free will and determinism, because we are the numbers that are creating our fates. We are the numbers that are creating our fates, and that the fates are optimized to be as unpredictable and irrational as they can be by definition. So even if the problem with free will is that it doesn't leave any space for rationality, well, that's true of any case other than the case that we live in, which the golden ratio has certain characteristics, like non-destructive charge interference. So like when the charges collapse along these golden ratio spirals, like none of the frequencies in the charges interfere with each other, which is like the complete concept of perfect harmony. So when you have a physical field of information that is defined as perfect harmony of wisdom and intelligence, I think there's a proof of God in there somewhere. And also quantum aliasing provides a explanation for why things aren't perfect, and why, like, if there's a God, why is there this or that, like, negative thing in the world. And quantum aliasing also explains, like, that there's a threshold, like, once you kind of get smaller than a certain distance away from us in scale, or larger than a certain distance away from us in scale, you lose resolution. Like, I can't really see galaxies far away or atoms close away, whatever you would say for that. But these things are so far in either being small or big that they're really not in the center of focus for my consciousness, and they lose information to become part of the higher dimensions and hidden variables we find throughout all of current modern science on the topic. So it's kind of like the current modern science is all stuck there, just like discussing like hidden variables and degrees of freedom, where some of our spiritual teachers for thousands of years have known a lot of this stuff they're discovering for the first time, apparently, or whatever. And so it just kind of shows you that our whole spiritual education system has been messed with, and has been lost, or we've forgotten a lot of the things that we knew at one point. And I'm frustrated because what I'm explaining to you right now is just the tip of the iceberg, what I've been learning in my independent studies, and I've come to the conclusion that reason that people don't know the answers to these kinds of questions is not because there's nobody out there that knows them. It's more because people out there are not willing to accept that there are people smarter than them, and that they're not the top of the heap. So when you go to the universities, they cannot be disputed to be the best at it. And anytime that you go up to somebody and tell them why gravity and time exist, then it's oh, who are you to say that? Well, I'm the person that actually does know the answer, and I can show you on paper. But no, it's all about ego, and it's all about politics, and it's all about information control and stuff, and so this is why I'm doing this YouTube channel. Hopefully you will enjoy it. If you don't like it and you're one of those people who just wants me to leave them alone, then don't go to my YouTube channel. Have a good one.